Good morning, everybody. The battles at Lexington and Concord were in April of 1775, and in October of that same year, on this date, the 13th, the Continental Congress established the Continental Navy. And even though it was disbanded at the end of the Revolutionary War, it was the beginning of our modern United States Navy. When the Revolutionary War began, we were clinging by our fingernails to the eastern seaboard, and even though we were successful on land, at least in the early days, here's Lexington Green, later, of course, we win at the Concord Bridge, we still had to deal with the British Navy, and the British Navy was the best on the planet. It had lots of ships, lots of guns, ammo, great leaders, a long tradition, and we had none of that. Rhode Island was the first state to really put pressure on the Continental Congress because it had quite a sea economy. Here's Narragansett Bay, and its merchants had been harassed by the British for a long time. So George Washington, on his own, chartered a ship, the schooner Hannah, with the idea of raiding British shipping for much-needed supplies. And he got that ship from John Glover. Here's a statue of John Glover in Boston, and John Glover later helped Washington on the night of Christmas Eve cross to Delaware because Glover knew about crossing water full of ice. So here's our event. October 13, 1775, the Continental Congress established the Continental Navy. One of the first ships in that Navy was the Alfred. And note, it's not the USS Alfred. The USS label doesn't get established until the early 1900s. Another early ship was the Boston. The Continental Congress had ordered the building of about a dozen ships, and they had a real mixed legacy and didn't really make that much difference in the outcome of the war. One of the men who can claim to be the father of the American Navy was John Barry. And he helped that early Continental Navy get organized and get established. One of the first actions of the Continental Navy was the raid on Nassau in the Bahamas, and it was a raid for gunpowder and other war material because we were really short on that, and the raid was sort of successful. Another early action was in Lake Champlain, where the British Navy defeated our Continental Navy. Our leader was Benedict Arnold, who later was able to be victorious at Saratoga, partly because we had slowed the British Navy down here. Many of our sailors who helped out during the Revolution were privateers, and the line between privateer and pirate is pretty hazy, but one of the differences is that privateers have one of these, a letter of marque, and this basically authorizes that person to seize a ship, take the ship back to an admiralty court in his own country, and get rewarded for it. One of the famous sailors during that time period was John Paul Jones. He had a very famous quote, "I have not yet begun to fight." But the ship he was in when he defeated the British ship was a French-made ship. And John Paul Jones was buried in Paris, and then his grave was forgotten. And years later, our ambassador tracked it down, had it brought back to Annapolis, and here's the crypt of John Paul Jones in Annapolis today. Maybe the most famous naval action during the Revolution was the French Navy helping us, especially in the siege of Yorktown. Because the Brits couldn't get supplies, they surrendered, and the war was over. And when the war was over, we focused initially on all the land we received from Britain, everything in green. And the Navy was neglected and allowed to just disappear. But the Naval Act of 1794 got the Navy going again, and one of the things Congress ordered was the building of 6 frigates. And this book by Ian Toll is a great story about those early warships, and one of them was Old Ironside, USS Constitution, pictured here, along with modern warships. So as we look at the history of the Navy, those early years of the Continental Navy were very important.